Good afternoon. This is the meeting of the June 4th, 2018 Glendale Water and Power Commission. First item.
1, roll call. Commissioner Venetian.
Here.
Commissioner Camargo.
Here.
Commissioner Kadikian.
Here.
President Hill. Commissioner Hill will not be joining tonight's meeting. President Lau.
Present. Next item.
2, approval of the minutes of the May 7, 2017 meeting.
Commissioners, do we have any changes or edits? I just had one.
None from me.
Yeah, sorry, there's just a nit in reviewing these previously. So under roll call, that first, you need a comma between Evanesian and Camargo. I have no other changes.
Okay, on the second page, third line, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On the 8th paragraph, third line, there is some degree of variation due to recreational marijuana grow houses, aggressive, and then I think there's a word missing there, aggressive growth of distributed energy. It says aggressive with, but I think there just needs to be an edit there. I'm not sure what the intention of the phrase was. Is it aggressive growth?
Yeah, it should be. It is something like along the lines of growth of distributed energy, right?
Commission President.
Aggressive distributed energy.
Okay.
So delete the word with.
Delete the word with, yeah.
Okay.
Delete the word with.
So it's really an aggressive distributed energy program because we're talking about a specific program. No?
Could be any number of programs.
It could be
He's talking
individual-
about other utilities mostly and some variations that could occur that are different than Glendale. We obviously don't have grow houses in Glendale, but there are cities that do have grow houses.
Right.
So that could change some of the dynamics. So I think Mr. George's point was trying to differentiate Glendale from some other utilities, which also has a factor in their rate structures.
Got it.
Or
Okay.
consumption in this case. Mr. Avanesian asked about consumption specifically.
Any other changes, edits? Okay. Should we have a motion to approve with the edit?
I
The
move.
edits?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next item?
3, GWP Commission staff comments.
So at this time, we'd like to recognize one of our former commissioners, former colleague, Terry Chan. Terry, if you would like to approach, and we have a plaque to give to you. Yes. Would you like her to come up here so we can do a photo with the...
Probably after you
Okay.
read it and
Okay.
yeah.
So, in recognition of your service, the City of Glendale recognizes Terry Chan with gratitude for your years of outstanding service to the Glendale Water and Power Commission from May of 2008 to April of 2017. So we're a little overdue in this recognition. I do want to say it was such an honor and pleasure to serve with you, especially as a new commissioner. You really helped to show me the ropes. So I appreciate the time that we got to serve together. We certainly miss your wise counsel here on this commission now, but we wish you well in your future volunteer efforts here in Glendale, and we're just thrilled that you could be here today to receive this honor. So thank you so much for all of your wonderful work on this commission and on behalf of the citizens of Glendale.
Thank you. Can I say a couple words?
Well, yes, absolutely. You could say a few words, but I just wanted to add that you were a commissioner, Ms. Chan, when I came on as the new general manager, and it was a pleasure to work with you, and I appreciate your patience and your guidance, and you're obviously a professional in the business, or now a distinguished retired professional in the business. So it was not only a pleasure, but an honor to work with you. So as Ms. Lahl said, a little bit overdue, but thank you so much. On behalf of the City of Glendale, the council, and the GWP staff, thank you very much.
Should I come up, or can I make my remarks now? Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, President Lahl, and my fellow commissioners and General Manager Zern. It was my honor and privilege to serve during the 9 years of service alongside my fellow commissioners, the general managers, I think 2 at least, and the GWP staff. We were able to make a lot of accomplishments in many pertinent areas, including energy efficiency, water conservation, increasing renewable resources, improving the water and power infrastructure, and also the rate structure. I'm very thankful to all of you for your support, and I am very proud to have been able to participate in this critical role. So thanks again for this recognition. It definitely was not needed, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
We will need a photographer, somebody volunteering from the I love that. Please, we'll take it with the whole. You need to go. You need to go inside. I don't know.
No, I think we're here. Nice to meet you. Yeah, nice to meet you. So good to see you.
Hi, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Hi, good to see you again.
And this is for you. Should we pull together and do a photo? Sure. Yeah. Very official. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here. And I know something that's going to be coming from Laura as well, to say thank you.
Thanks.
Good to see you. Thank you, Commissioner Chan. If I could just say that I think you exemplify what is possible when citizens come forward to volunteer their time on behalf of their fellow citizens for the benefit of the entire city. So thank you, and you've been an example to us all. Are there any other comments from either commissioners or staff at this point?
No.
Should we move to the next item?
4A, Water Division Consumer Confidence Report.
President Law, members of the commission, I'm going to introduce James Sines, our water quality manager, to give the report. But first, I just wanted to, like I normally do, is talk about, it's really our staff that make all the things that we talk about in these reports happen. And if I could have everyone in the water quality staff stand up. You know, this is the group of men and women that really work to protect the safety of the water here in the city of Glendale. And I think there might be two people that aren't here, right? One. Everybody's here, so it's just that small group that takes all these samples, does all this reporting, and puts together the consumer confidence report that Mr. Sines is going to talk about. So, Mr. Sines, come up.
President Law, Commissioners, my name is James Sines, and it's a brief presentation on the Consumer Confidence Report. Just quick overview, I'll be going over aesthetics, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Consumer Confidence Report, some water quality standards, disinfection, microbial, groundwater treatment, and we'll conclude with some questions and answers, if any. In the past, You know, if it looked good, if it smelled good, if it tastes good, it didn't cause any immediate effect, everyone assumed, hey, it was okay to drink. And that was pretty much the basic standard before we learned that there were other connections with living organisms that can exist and cause health problems. Now, taste and odor and smell usually are considered secondary standards, and along with the primary standards, they make up just the quick regulations provided by the State Water Board. In 1974, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act. It authorized the EPA to set national health-based standard for drinking water. It was amended in 1996. This amendment included a cost-benefit analysis, which took into consideration when creating a maximum contaminant level. It also included operator certification, a source water assessment program, and the Consumer Confidence Report. The Consumer Confidence Report is an annual report that will list all the constituents found in the drinking water. The Glendale's water meets or exceeds all state and federal drinking water standards and can be viewed on Glendale Water and Power's website starting July 1st. As of now, the report is still being prepared and will be ready for view online and by mail if requested on July 1st. Even though the report's not ready, I'd like to just show you a quick shot of what the report will look like. Just a quick table of all the constituents found in the water, along with a brief description of what we do and what Glendale Water and Power has. Water quality standards, pretty basically, are put into two groups. An acute short-term effect, which include viruses, bacteria, protozoa, or a long-term kind of chronic effect. These would be considered like carcinogens, gastrointestinal irritation, or skin irritations. Disinfection is the destruction or deactivation of a pathogenic organism. It's not sterilization and it's not purification. So when we disinfect, we're adding free chlorine to maintain disinfectant residual. So along with free chlorine, we also add chloramines, which is a combined chlorine and ammonia that create this chloramines and work as a disinfectant in the system. Disinfectant residual is kept in the distribution system to deactivate any pathogenic organisms that may enter the system before it reaches your tap. And some changes in the last couple of years include the total coliform rule. This rule has been revised to set a maximum contaminant level for E. coli for protection against any fecal contamination. Requirements for monitoring total coliform and E. coli according to a sample siting plan, which we create every 5 years and update, and schedule specific to each public water system. Requirements for the assessment and corrective action when monitoring results will show that we may have been vulnerable to contamination. So if we did get any hits, public notification is required, and that will also be noted in the Consumer Confidence Report. Be happy to say that there have been no hits or no contamination in our system. Special language for this new rule has to be included in the CCR, and an assessment being conducted when there is occurrences of fecal contamination. So groundwater treatment. For chemical removal, we have a few examples of how Glendale treats water. Through absorption by way of granular activated carbon. This is used to move kind of industrial solvents and dry cleaning solvents such as TCE and PCE. Ion exchange for metals like hex chrome, and blending. So we'll have blending from imported water to combine with our source water to blend down any natural metals and inorganics. In conclusion, the City of Glendale's water meets all state and federal drinking water standards. GWP's water quality team and operators and engineers work diligently to keep the city's water supply safe and reliable. GWP has been on the cutting edge of new treatment technologies and treatment studies for decades. And that's it, if there's any questions.
Commissioners, questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Well, before that, this table is not readable.
Yes, yeah, the table actually was put in as an example of what to expect for the consumer confidence report. Our report is not complete right now, so I just wanted to kind of include an example of what to expect when you do see the report.
Thank you. My question is, when you are testing the water for quality, what percentage of that water goes to the river? Because I was in your facility and I saw, a part of this water goes to the river because of lower quality. So what percentage goes into the river?
So percentage, depending on how much we have to open up. So at any time, if sprinklers are running, if we have to conduct any type of discharge in our system to move water, it could be a few percentage each year. It's not very much, but we do take into consideration a percentage of water loss, and that water is also required to meet that river's the sources river sources levels. So not only do we have to maintain the drinking water standards, we also have to maintain an environmental standard when we do discharge into the river.
Thank you.
And James, are those different levels going back into a water source as compared to going to the drinking water system?
Yes, they are actually, Commissioner. They for one of the big examples is chlorine. So whenever we do discharge water, we have to remove the chlorine that's been added to the water because that is harmful to the aquatic life in the river. So one major thing that we look out for is to make sure that no chlorine gets discharged into the river.
Just one more question. First, thanks to you and the team for doing your work to make sure that the water here stays below these MCL levels. Appreciate that. Anything in your preliminary findings that you found surprised? I hear you saying on all these different factors that we are below the maximum contaminant levels. Was there anything in the report that causes you concern is probably an exaggeration, but anything that you might pay a little bit more attention to as a result of those findings?
Specifically, no, there really isn't anything that would catch your eye. Obviously with the advancements in technology, they're able to find anything in the water. And that's why with these standards, they kind of give us a guideline, and to be well below these standards, it just shows that even with the smallest detection, it's because of the advancements in the technology and what the labs use. But once we do see that we get close, that's when we start to take action.
Thank you.
Since moving here many years ago, I've always felt that the water here was quite hard. Is that the case, or is that just my perception?
No, that is the case.
Okay.
When you use a lot of groundwater, the groundwater will absorb all the minerals that are in that water, one of them being calcium and magnesium. Okay. And that you'll probably notice that when you wash your dishes, you'll see the film on your glasses or in your shower doors, or even a buildup at the end of the faucet, the aerators and the shower heads. Easy fixes, remove the shower heads, maybe soak them in vinegar for a little bit. That will remove it. Little home remedies like that really help with the hard water.
Does hardness or softness of water figure at all into a consideration of water quality, or that's under aesthetics?
That is also under aesthetics. So that what could be hard to one person can be not to another. It's pretty much personal personal preference. Some water, some hard water can make your skin feel dry. Soft water can actually make you feel slimy. So if you have a water softener, you might notice your water might feel a little slimy and take a little bit longer to get that soap off your body when you're taking a shower. Hard water kind of tends to leave you dry and but a little easier to remove the soaps.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great work, James, to you and your staff.
Listen, thank you to the staff members who came out to be present today. Really appreciate your appearance here at our meeting. Moving on to the next item.
4B, the update regarding RFP for local and regional renewal, low carbon and zero carbon energy and capacity resource options to serve to the city of Glendale.
So Commissioners, we released the RFP, the request for proposal, the first part of May. Last Wednesday on the 30th, we held our proposers conference for qualified firms. We had a tremendous turnout. We also we not only had a live meeting, but we also put a webinar together for that. So we had close to 150 people that participated. Obviously, some of those were redundant. We had people from the same firm in different locations that were listening in, but that's a very, very good turnout. Good questions, a lot of good compliments from the folks at the meeting, and we'll see what we can come back with. We're hoping for a lot of good ideas when this comes back on August 3rd. Questions?
That was my question, is when would we
August,
talk about, August 3rd.
August 3rd it comes back, but we won't be done vetting these out and evaluating them until probably the end of September, early October.
Okay.
We've given ourselves a pretty good amount of time to thoroughly go through these and try to build a portfolio, if you will, which may be a series of different projects, even different firms that we can put together and mesh as one for GWP. So we wanted to make sure we gave ourselves enough time to properly vet those and evaluate them.
From the conference attendees, were there any concerns as to they may not have enough time to provide responses?
No, interested firms are not concerned about the time. What they're concerned about is how serious we are. So that I made very abundantly clear to them, that we're very serious. I'm very serious about the process. So in other words, folks didn't want to waste their time if it wasn't going to be taken seriously and this was simply some window dressing. And I assured them that from my perspective it was not, and we would be moving forward. So the timeline, it just means a little extra work, but interested firms will make the time to make it happen. So the comments I got were, we can do that.
And I think City Council and also the citizenry of the city have been very vocal in their support of this process. So, good. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes back.
You too.
I have a question. My understanding is that you have breakdown this so you can work with different suppliers at the same time. Is it
It's
right?
possible, absolutely. So that's
So how you have broken down? I mean, technologically, how you have broken down? I mean,
well, to the extent that we can mesh the different technologies, some of them will stand alone, I'm sure. Others could be incorporated. That's not going to rule anybody out. In other words, it's not one firm against everybody else, and we're only looking at one firm or one program or one project. To the extent that we can take multiple projects and mesh those together, depending on what's being proposed, we're definitely looking at that. That's the portfolio concept, where we build a portfolio of options, and those options could be very different in what they bring to the table, and they could be different firms that are bringing them to the table. So all of that is keeping as much of the process open and accessible, not predetermining anything.
excellent, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? Okay. We do have a speaker card filled out, Mr. Bert Culver.
Hello, Commissioners. Hi. Dan Broughton couldn't be here today, so I'm reading some of this text is his. I came here for another reason. So there's an organization called Clear Energy 805 that was formed to help with a similar clean energy repowering in Ventura and adjacent counties. It's basically they're a nonprofit, and they're helping, they're focused on getting private site owners to meet up with clean power developers so that the clean power developers can put together packages to submit for the RFP in Ventura. Glendale Environmental Coalition would like to do something similar for this RFP, but we've reached out to the city manager, but we haven't heard back from her in several weeks. Now, of course, they don't have to work with us, but they are very unlikely to get a robust response from bidders for projects involving private sites without some additional help. Judging from the bidders conference, most of the responses are around the city-owned sites and direct sales of batteries. So I think they're going to miss out on a big opportunity of doing clean power development on private buildings and parking lots and whatnot in the city. And that's where we would like to help out. We'd like to reach out to, well, we have a list of clean energy developers, and we'd like to match them up to private site owners. One thing Clean Energy 805 did was they had a conference where they brought all these parties into the room together, and it was kind of like a pitch fest. And the developers pitched their clean energy solutions for the private site owners. And it went pretty well. The RFP in Ventura is still out, so it's hard to say the outcome. In any case, they need to, it would be really great if they extended the time frame of the RFP. 90 days was for the more simple RFI, and now for an RFP, I think it would send a signal to the market that the city was serious if they put a longer period, because 90 days is short by any measure. Anyway, they need to work on building a bridge between developers and private site owners, and we'd like to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Culver. That's all the comment cards I have on this item. So we can move on to the next item.
I did have one question on this item, President Lott. Part of our objective when we were doing the Grayson Repower is trying to encourage or see how we can do so that private individuals put rooftop solars. Have any of these individuals who participated in or the companies who participated in the conference call, were they any of installers or developers who could give incentives or something to that extent so that there's a faster penetration of rooftop solar in Glendale? I mean, obviously they got to work with GWP for permits and what have you, particularly with regards to the battery. At this point, they cannot install private batteries in private houses. I'm trying to see whether we're getting these people getting involved in this process, encourage the process of having people install rooftop solar with individual batteries to bring the peak down, which would be good for us.
We already have a program such as that, which is in our public benefit charge, and we allocate $1 million a year to that. These companies are coming in and looking at projects where they can get a minimum of 5 megawatts, 0.5 megawatts, excuse me.
Okay.
So they're going to look at things like virtual power plants, which are large scale areas, usually private or business type entities, and that's where you're going to get a greater. I mean, some of the folks who provide rooftop solar to the average resident, they were there, but they also do much larger scale projects.
Yeah, exactly. It's these virtual power plants I'm talking about. Some of these companies are actually putting it on regular rooftop solars and becoming partners with the property owner.
Yeah. There's been some cases of that, but there's definitely, we called out virtual power plants as an option, and we know that there's at least a couple firms that are looking at it. I don't know if it'll penetrate into a residential area as much as it probably will penetrate into a commercial area. But we get the idea, where you have private property, likely it'll be a power purchase agreement for us since we won't own the equipment or the property itself. That's something we definitely called out specifically in the proposal, non-wires type of systems that can feed back. So I think by the participation we had at this point, we've covered pretty much all the areas that I think can be covered, and we've got people asking really, really good and specific questions about all aspects of the city, whether it's private property or publicly owned property. So I'm confident we'll see some good ideas. I'm very confident.
any further questions or comments on this item? Seeing no hands raised, move on to the next item.
4C, budget presentation.
So members of the commission, we will, let's see if we can fire it up. Yes, ma'am. So this is what we call the dashboard for the GWP budget. In the upper left box, you see just a breakdown of the various categories: salaries and benefits, our maintenance and operation. Capital maintenance and operation includes everything from buying tools to buying power and gas to produce electricity. We have capital outlay and water, excuse me, make sure I don't shortchange the water department. That's buying water as well. Our capital outlay, which is really the purchase of things like trucks and large pieces of equipment. Capital improvement, which is the actual construction and infrastructure. Primarily, it also can include the technical infrastructure, and then the transfer to the general fund, and that leaves us with a total budget, a projected budget for 18-19 of $332 million, just under 333 million total. Right-hand box, upper right-hand box, just shows a breakdown of the staffing that we have. And you can see it by management, non-management, and then our hourly full-time equivalent grouping that we have there as well, for a total of 345.55. I know that always comes. So the other 0.45 is somewhere else, and it could be in another department's budget, or it could be how it works out. But believe me, it's a whole person. We are just using his or her 0.55. And then down below is the various funds and how the breakout is. And so you see the current adopted budget in each of those funds, and then what the proposed budget is for 18 and 19, and then whatever differences there are. So you see some gains in the public benefit. That's what we were just talking about. That's where our incentives for solar programs. We added $1 million a year for the next 2 years to look at developing community solar. We had a decrease in the revenue fund. We've cut some costs there. The depreciation fund is just as we go through and depreciate the equipment, we have a large increase there. And then the other capital and the customer repair fund, that's a customer paid fund. Okay. And then in the water side, you see this is the breakout for that particular operation for the water division. And they're looking at a total budget of $55 million essentially on the revenue fund, and then again we depreciate it. It's kind of a little different way that we budget in GWP. It's sometimes a little bit awkward, but it is the way it has been set up, and so we follow that and then try to mesh that with the generally accepted accounting principles for the government sector. Okay. Then the capital improvement program. So these are three of the larger projects that we have slated here, and they're divided between the two electric and water funds. So we have a new telephone system. This is primarily, if you remember, we gave you a overview of the customer service business evaluation that we did. One of the big issues there was an outdated phone system that lacked a lot of features that would help the customers answer their question before they had to get to a live body, and allowed them different options that could alleviate having to sit on the phone and wait. And it's really an old system. So this was we put in the budget to replace that. And then the Perkins building, which is technically owned by GWP, and then we charge rent out to the other individuals. It's going through some tenant improvements, mostly Americans with Disability Act upgrades. And then our exterior water feature is going to be renovated. That is a feature we've had a lot of problems with over the years. As you can see, it has been non-operational for many years now. And so we're going to change the look of that and go away from a water feature and probably do more of a planted type operation, which also is a water saving measure. These are a few of the projects you'll see that are still outstanding. In other words, we have not finished our obligations on those. The Grayson Repower, which was the engineering and environmental work that's been done, and that has pretty much been finished. And at this point in time, as we go through the RFP process to look at any changes there, the next move would be looking at what the ultimate decision will be to repower. We just have in there some overhaul of our turbines and some of our existing equipment. You do see the biogas renewable project there. We have $500,000 of new money set aside to conduct an EIR as per the council's direction. And we have modifications to Unit 9. That's in anticipation of segregating that unit from the rest of the units in the event that we keep that and that the others are eliminated. And then this is just a number of the programs. And I think you've seen these as we've gone through CIP updates with you in the past. And this, just from a budgetary standpoint, we show what the remaining budgets on those are. The big number there is the fiber plant implementation. So we're still waiting to make that firm connection to One Wilshire, at which point we'll start to build out our system and spend this money a little bit. So the ISD, our ISD department is spearheading that connection. And then once we get that, we can move on with expanding our fiber system and then begin to aggressively market it. And then we have just a number of, some of these are software or hardware upgrades. Some of them are actual physical upgrades. You see the Howard substation roofing replacement. Next one, yeah. And then here you start to see these, a lot of these are our ongoing programs, and then you see the far column where we're putting either additional money into those as they continue to be needed on an annual basis, and then also adding some, you can see at the bottom we have some new projects there, which are just essentially, that's part of the grid modernization, that's part of the infrastructure upkeep. You have just ongoing vault replacements, new streetlights and replacement streetlights, transformer upgrades, pole replacements, capacity bank conversions and upgrades. That these are all what I would say are ongoing maintenance issues that we have to deal with in regards to the electric infrastructure. And then we have set aside some money for emergency repairs at the power plant, which tends to be a lot more than that on an annual basis, but we put a modest amount. And then in the water fund, you'll see there that last line, electric customer paid capital. That's where somebody will come in who's developing a project and they require new electrical service. So they pay us to do the work for them, because about 99.9% of the time, they would rather go with us, and we tend to be cheaper. But they put the money up, we take care of the project, and then that money comes in to cover the costs. On the water fund, very much similar. You've got some of these projects that we have been moving towards. Many of these are very close to completion. We don't close them out until we've got all the paperwork done. So some of these may be final notices, some of them may be release of retention. And then once the projects have been completed, we will close them and move them off the books. We go through an exercise on a regular basis of ensuring, looking at the projects, making sure they're done. If they're done, they're closed, the money goes back into the fund. I don't like to keep a lot of projects on the books if at all possible. And then again, as we go down, some of these may look familiar to you, as we've talked to you about a Hoover Toll Keppel, big recycle project there. A lot of that, majority of that was grant funding from the state. We had to do some basic housekeeping we had slope repairs and some tank replacements and some pump station upgrades. And then you see those last four where we are continuing those ongoing infrastructure on the water side. These are those ongoing infrastructure needs that we have to stay on top of. And you see the big number there is pipeline management. That's just pipes in the ground, replacing them and making sure that we've got good, solid infrastructure in place. And again, we've got some specific projects, but a lot of these are the ongoing upgrades and replacements that are just part of what we do. And then just to recap, so The utility capital improvement for the electric utility is about just a tad under $11 million for next year. Water just a little bit over $9 million. And this is kind of a sweet spot for us. So it's taken us a while to get here. You may recall a few years ago we were not in a very good financial situation. We ended all CIP programs. We issued bonds. We put all of the bond proceeds into play and have spent those. And this is pretty much where we're at, somewhere in the 9 to 12 for water and somewhere in the 10 to 12 for electric. But I think this is kind of where we feel comfortable, making sure that we don't overextend ourselves. There's no sense budgeting for projects we can't get to, and making sure that we're not tearing the entire city up all at one time, coordinating with the Public Works Department on their infrastructure work as well. So I think we've kind of reached that really nice place with this particular CIP budget, and this is pay-go. So you recall the objective of going with pay-go capital, where we're not bond financing what I think is our routine work and what we shouldn't be bond financing. If we build a power plant or we build a reservoir or something like that, that's a little bit different situation, or a substation. But the day-to-day kind of bread and butter, as I've called it, infrastructure work, we've set ourselves on a course to have that funded on a pay-go basis, and we've reached that point. And as you know from our presentation to you on the proposed next 5-year rate schedule, we've maintained that in both water and electric as well. And I think that's all we have. We didn't anticipate a lot of increase in purchase power. We've kind of honed that down a little bit, but we have obviously some contingency in the event that our own facility is unable to generate. And at this point in time, as we embark on the summer and it's starting to get warmer already, we're very concerned about that. We do have some issues. Our water conservation, it's a good thing. Water conservation wise, our usage has not gone back up to where it was. Those mandatory conservation measures have established some level of routine for folks. Yet we're locked into a couple of issues with MWD, so we may be purchasing water at above where we need to be, but we'll work through that with MWD. We signed long-term contracts not anticipating that you'd see this kind of reduction, but we will deal with that. All in all, we are in very good shape, very good financial shape. Reserves are very good. The M&O and the capital programs are robust, yet austere in the sense they're robust in that they're getting accomplished what needs to be accomplished. But I don't think we've overspent. I think we've done a lot of things to reduce our budget. And if you looked at it over the last couple of years, we haven't moved a whole lot in our costs. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zern. Really appreciate especially on the capital improvement side, going toward PAYGO. That is a significant achievement, I guess I would say, over the last few years that I've been here on this commission. So I would just ask you, so where did you have to draw the line on certain things? So I see that in the budget there significant increases on things like transformer replacements and new pipeline on the water side. Where did you, speaking to your last point, so where did you have to make some decisions? Any examples that you can share about certain types of work that you thought was appropriate, either from a safety or reliability perspective, to continue to defer to the future? What can you say about that sort of the judgment that went into what does and does not make the budget?
Right. I think that the key was we started with the staffing levels. So those numbers you saw are significantly less than they were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. So those are permanent, long-standing reductions that have an impact. Then we went methodically through the M&O budget and continued to hone that down. I think sometimes when you get in a straight-up enterprise fund like this, that you tend to maybe over-budget on certain things, or you not be as what I would say, conscious of some of the fine budgeting techniques that I was accustomed to when I had to compete for the money with other people. And so I just brought that kind of perspective here. So we were looking at every single thing as if it, we needed to make sure we had what was necessary, but that we weren't over budgeting for things. And then when we got to capital, I think that's where we tried to be more liberal because of the value of that investment. So, you know, we looked at it from, both electric and water have prioritized the various programs. We looked at what we could accomplish in a year so we wouldn't overextend ourselves. You know, why put 20 million in when you know good and well you're only going to spend 10? But every one of our programs has been evaluated and has been prioritized. For instance, in water, you would look at things like fire suppression. You would look at age of pipes. You would look at pressure. On the electric side, it's pretty much, you know, that 4 kV to 12 kV upgrade and everything that goes with it. So, you know, that's just moving new transformers. I'd like to move faster, but I think we're moving at a pretty good pace today. And so that total upgrade is important. Then we look at the substations and we feel pretty comfortable where we're at with those. So each of those, you know, from an internal perspective, we go through. But I would say that we tend to be a little bit more frugal when it comes to the day-to-day maintenance and operation, with the exception of maybe purchase power. But when it comes to CIP, I tend to you know, want to make sure that we have plenty of money in there and that we're continuing to undertake as much as we can because of the value of the infrastructure, or I should say, not only the value of the infrastructure, but the consequences of not maintaining your infrastructure on either the electric or water side. They can be very devastating.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners,
No
any
question, ma'am.
questions? I do.
Yeah, I have
sorry?
I have a question. Talking about electrical maintenance. Our electrical panels and apparatus have arc flash labels to wear proper PPE, personal protective equipment.
Yes.
You're using that?
Everything is, that's one thing, and maybe I should have clarified that. Safety is a huge issue in anything we do. So both water and electric. So you saw the water quality folks here. You know, we've systematically weaned ourselves off of gas chlorine as a treatment because of the inherent side effect dangers that you can have with that. So we're getting ourselves off that. On the electric side, we try to go with whatever state-of-the-art safety equipment, warning, whatever it may be, uniforms, whatever protective devices, we are always looking at that. And so that's one area where we aren't frugal, if that was your question. When we're in looking at M&O budgets and capital budgets both, because they can apply, safety can apply on both of those, we're not cutting those corners, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, this is technical thing, but when you're changing things in power system, then you have to run power system studies to know what is the short circuit, and then based on that, you are preparing a label.
Yes.
It says that what is the incident energy,
Yes.
and what you have to wear. You have that label.
Yes, that's the engineering department working with the maintenance department and everybody coordinating that together and making sure that's absolutely taken care of.
Excellent.
Yes.
Commissioners? Okay. I have one speaker card on this item. Mr. Byrd Culver.
Hello again, Commissioners. Hi. I came here today to comment on the public benefit charge budget. I was looking at the numbers and I figured out a way that within 10 years we could get all of the low-income customers onto solar using the existing budget, not spending anything extra. So right now they have budgeted $2.3 million per year for a $15 a month discount on low-income households on their bills, just a direct subsidy. That's about 15% of Glendale households. That's better than statewide average of 33%. But they have $1 million set aside now for this community solar program. So if they took the community solar program and dedicated it solely to low-income customers, then as the customers moved off of the direct subsidy onto into the low-income community solar, you could take the budget from that was dedicated to them on the subsidy and put it into the low-income community solar. So the next year you'd have 1,100,000 or something like that. I worked out the numbers. And your subsidy budget would then decrease by a little bit, and then you keep moving customers off. And within 10 years, you have all of the low-income customers are now onto community solar, and you have about a 25 megawatt, 17 megawatt, well, you have about 25 megawatts solar built into the city as a public resource for the city that you wouldn't have had otherwise, and you've spent no additional money. And after the 10 years, then you can continue building the community solar program and diversify beyond low-income customers and start giving it to customers who don't have access to solar. And I think within, well, I didn't run the numbers, but at the end of 2035, you could have 30,000 customers, households, on the discount program. And I also included expanding the discount over the years by 2%. So by the end of 10 years, you're giving $18 a month discount instead of the $15 a month. This is all for current budget amounts. So I would really appreciate, I guess I'm here to ask the utility if they could recommend to the council to dedicate the low income, to dedicate the budget for the community solar to low income customers and set up some way of transferring the budget from the direct subsidy to the community solar program as customers move from one program to the other. And with all that, we get a huge benefit for Glendale, and it costs us nothing extra. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Culver.
I'll submit I have a little graph showing you how it works, so I'll submit it.
Please do. Mr. Zern, could you give us a little bit more of an idea about the community solar program as it currently stands?
As I mentioned earlier, this is our first foray into it, so our PBC budget has $1 million in each of the next 2 fiscal years set aside to begin looking for opportunities to develop community solar projects.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not quite sure how that'll all
So
work out.
it's
Community solar has...
It's not designed yet?
No,
Okay.
no. Community solar has a lot of different, aspects to it. And I'm sure some of you have looked into it further and understand. And certainly I have no idea how to make anything out of what was just said. But, we will not be recommending from the general manager that we reduce the subsidy to our ratepayers, to our most needy ratepayers. That won't be happening, from me at least. Obviously, the council gets to make the final decision. But, at the end of the day, this is something the state is struggling with. Last Wednesday, the CEC had a full-day conference on discussing low-income energy programs and how to bring that to them, and there is absolutely no consensus. One of the things that was mentioned was having to put into effect probably another financial tariff on utilities to help pay for it. There's also the issue of lack of benefit and lack of confidence in the ability to see any kind of reduction in their bills. These are folks that are struggling to make ends meet. I don't know that they're as interested where the power comes from as how much that power costs.
Well, there are communities, I'm aware of communities that are reliant almost solely on electricity for all of their residential power use, so they don't have natural gas. So for them, high electricity rates are even compounded by the fact that they are consuming more electricity per
Correct.
person.
And that's true here. We have a pretty fair amount of multifamily, and I think it's just, if you're building a multifamily building, it behooves you as the owner of that building to be all electric. You don't have things like pilot lights for gas that you have to be concerned about and those dangers. So, most of our multifamily, which is where a lot of our low-income folks reside, is almost all electric. So that plays right to what you said.
Right, so they kind of get hit twice.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But as we go down the path of developing these projects, we'll be able to have some test cases and then return with results and see what we've come up with and how we can hopefully partner with some facilities. And if not, at the end of the day, there's solar programs where we can put the green energy into the system. It benefits our portfolio, reduces thermal generation, and that's obviously one of our key goals as well.
I also like to comment that the public benefit charge and environmental awareness are not mutually, don't have to be mutually exclusive one of the other. You don't have to do one or the other. And I think the fact that we are providing the subsidy to the most needy, that's fine. And if we want to move forward and encourage environmental positive, I think we shouldn't use the most needed funds to develop that kind of technology. I think we should continue to provide as much assistance to the most needy of our citizens, and I think if we want to develop environmental friendly options, that cost, or at least the initial cost of developing those, should be those who can bear that burden, and eventually maybe we can start shifting them over to that. But I don't think one fund can be either used for this purpose or that purpose. I think we should just continue the way we're doing with regards to the public benefit, and then see how we can do otherwise to move forward and provide better assistance.
It's a good point. I agree with you. And I think that the bottom line of what you're saying there is we're doing both. I mean, we got $2 million over the next 2 years for community solar. We have $2 million over the next 2 years for our solar solutions program, which is essentially dedicated to rooftop solar on primarily single family homes. So we're doing that, and we're still able to help out some of our neediest residents, and I think that's important.
Yeah, that's true. And I just want to add, I mean, solar system is more expensive. If you're going to do something for poor people, you have to utilize system that is not more expensive.
Correct.
So solar is not appropriate for poor people.
Yeah.
You know, if there be solar, if you have enough budget to do solar and help the poor people at the same time, that is okay. Otherwise, I mean, solar is more expensive.
It's true, and the price gap between traditional sources of fuel and solar and wind primarily, now storage, that gap has closed tremendously over the years. But I don't think anybody that I've ever heard at the state level or anybody else has said you're going to get cheaper rates by doing this. I think our goal is to see if we can keep rates or keep the impact to a minimum on the ratepayers. Hopefully, if we could even hold the line. That's why I think we had a conversation a few weeks ago when we were talking about batteries, and I had mentioned, I think it was Commissioner Hale, I said, I'd hold off. I wouldn't buy right now. Let's wait and see till we get to that point where we're actually doing the retrofits or the repower, and then see if we get prices to come down even more. But very good point.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll move to the next item.
5, actions. Commission recommendations on water and electric rates and electric rate ordinance. 1, motion recommending that the city council not adopt the proposed Glendale Water and Power water service rates. 2, motion recommending that the city council not adopt the proposed Glendale Water and Power electric service rates and electric rate ordinance.
So Commissioners, this is a follow-up to our previous meeting where we gave you the rate presentation, and we did not have an opportunity for you to, as a body, to make a recommendation to the council. So Ms. Martirosyan has worked diligently to put together the mechanisms for you to consider and to vote on if you so desire to do that. I'll let her take it from here.
Commission President Lal, Commission members, you have before you 2 separate motions, proposed motions. I will be finalizing them depending on the direction the Commission provides this afternoon. One is for the electric rates. The motion sets forth that the Commission recommends to the City Council to either adopt or not adopt the proposed electric rates and the proposed changes, amendments to the city's electric rates ordinance. The other motion is a motion recommending either the adoption or not adoption of the proposed water rates.
So with that, we can answer any questions that you might have, or I will let you deliberate.
I have some questions based
Sure.
on the rates that we just presented. We'll start with the water.
Could I just go back, the last time that we met, the city council was scheduled to convene a meeting and discuss the rates. Have they taken any action? Has any action, did that
No, ma'am.
meeting happen? So
They have been presented on at least 2 occasions,
okay,
but no action has been taken. That was scheduled for tomorrow night, but that's been deferred to the 12th. So the council will consider the budget on June the 12th, and at that point, all the rates will be in there, including wastewater, which is outside of GWP.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that was in the record. Please proceed.
So, you mentioned this, Mr. Zern, before. We have a purchase agreement with WMD that we're supposed to purchase certain amount of water, and we did it a while back, I think 2015 or 5. How much longer do we have on that?
I believe it was a 10-year agreement. Mr. DeGhetto, it was a 10-year agreement. And, you know, you look at it and you kind of project and say we could lock in a price, and all of a sudden, we had, not a bad thing. We had great participation from our residents, but now we have a long-term agreement that we'll have to honor.
And how much more are we buying in dollar-wise that we didn't need?
Mike, did you have a projection on what that might be if trends stayed the way they are?
President Law, members of the commission, Michael DeGhetto, Chief AGM for Water at Glendale Water and Power. Commissioner Kadikian, the estimate's about $10 million that we're going to hold in reserve. So we're going to hold that if we don't meet that purchase order amount. You know, otherwise we'll purchase that water, if that makes sense. It just really depends on customer usage.
Right. So from what I'm understanding, over the next term of this year, of the contract, we anticipate to buy about $10 million worth of water that we may not be able to use.
We're going to hold in reserve that amount of money
Right.
in case we don't purchase that much.
Right.
We may end up purchasing that much. It just depends on customer usage.
My question is, could we incentivize the people to kind of use that? Because we don't want to, I mean, I know we're in a drought and we're trying to at the same time save water, but we're going to spend this money regardless.
That's a dilemma that we face, right?
That is a deep philosophical question.
I would,
Yeah.
personally, right now, I mean, it's a good question. But off the top of my head, I would be reluctant, if not opposed, to trying to say, oh, you can use water for a little while, so until we get through this agreement. I think what we want to see play out is we're anticipating a pretty warm summer. So our usage has ticked up a little bit, Mike. Not a lot, but it's ticked up a little bit. So we don't know that the gap is going to be as great. We just took the precautions of setting that money aside. I can guarantee you that we're going to use it all, but I don't think it's going to be 10 million. I think it's going to be something less than that. And we've already attempted to talk to MWD, but you're locked in. They make long-term commitments based on the commitments of their members, and so. And
I would add that, you know, that, and it's 2024 when this one's going to expire. It was 2014 when we signed it. I mean, we'll sign another purchase order as well, because signing that purchase order, you commit to a certain amount of water, and what it does is it gets you in the tier 1 rate. So it's a huge savings in order to do that.
If you ran the numbers, it's possible, we did this a little bit, that it actually may cost more by not having been locked in, so.
No, I agree. And I'm not saying what happened was wrong. All I'm trying to say is,
We could use
we
it.
make more money out of this some way? Either sell it to the resident, let their lawns be greener for the next 10 years, but at the same time, because I know it's not politically correct, but that's not my forte, so let's go with that. Or alternatively, could we sell it to another water agency because we've got lower rates, maybe to Pasadena, Burbank, LA, I'm not sure.
We have
Commissioner Kadikian, we can't, because we're all member agencies.
Okay.
So you can't sell water each other that way to avoid your own purchase order.
We have some emergency agreements with surrounding it, but yeah, we couldn't become essentially the wholesaler of water.
Right, and we do have those emergency agreements, and we all have to account to Met, like how much of it was actually ours.
So everything is accounted for.
Just trying to save money.
Yeah, no,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that.
So can I ask a follow-up question before you move to your next item?
Sure.
So could there be an opportunity to sort of flex which water we use? So that is to say, maybe dial back, traditionally, I've viewed that the best water that we can use is the one out of our aquifers, right, as compared to, what we purchase from MWD. Is there an opportunity to dial back on some of those aquifers? Because I seem to recall that, especially with the long droughts that we've had, that some of our aquifers are down. Is there an opportunity to perhaps use this, since we have the money in reserve anyway, spend the money as planned with NWD and allow some of the aquifers to recover? Is that an opportunity?
One of the reasons we use the well water, and if you remember, we showed the water code that says that the greatest need, the greatest need is considered to be the residential water. So that allows us to keep the residential rates lower, to use that well water. If we turned around and used all the MWD water, there's a chance we'd have to recalculate the rates, and because you'd have to be specifically cost of service, and so then we might have a problem. So I wouldn't do that.
And Commissioner Camargo, the other thing about that is when we use our groundwater, the cost of that is essentially zero, except for the pumping.
Right.
So we would be comparing $0 to $1,140 an acre foot. So it's a big difference. So we always try and use our local supply first.
Understood. Yep.
The other part of that is because of our consent decree, the water that we pump from the San Fernando Basin, we're basically obligated to take that water because the respondents group has to treat it to comply with the consent decree for our operable unit. And we don't really have, additional wells or additional capacity beyond what goes through our treatment plant.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
And the water can't be stored.
We store as much as you can. You don't want to store too much. One of our things is I think we had stored too much water over the years, so we've tried to reduce our storage because you'll have dated water and you don't want water sitting too long.
Oh, okay. So
that you have to treat. I don't know that you'd like us delivering 380-day cold water to your house, and I don't think we want that for anybody. So we've tried to reduce our storage to that sweet spot again, where we have our coverage for our customer needs, but also coverage for fire suppression. But at the same time, we're not holding on to water. Those gentlemen and ladies that you saw here earlier, that presents a whole lot more work for them to having to keep treating the water that's been sitting there. So no easy answer to this. Really good questions. Obviously, we've kind of banged our head against the wall on this too. But again, not our hope that water usage increases, but we're anticipating it's going to go up a little bit, especially if this turns out to be a hotter, drier summer that some are predicting. So we'll see.
And I would add that it's something that I've been very concerned about for a while. So having the opportunity to put that into our rate study and having those two things coincide is like a really prudent way to manage the utility.
The proposed charges, and currently there is about 7 categories: single family, multifamily, commercial, irrigation, private fire line, recycled water, commercial, and recycled water irrigation. Now, on the prior COSA on the water, there were 15 classes that were collapsed into each other to a certain extent. The city was one of those classes, which is not in here any longer. Where does the city's use of water goes in there? Irrigation, commercial?
We both believe we're covered in both of those, depending. So in some park applications, you may have an irrigation rate. Parks pays a lot of the irrigation rate. Common areas, let's say out in center of the plaza here, parks may also be paying irrigation rate. Our buildings generally will fall into commercial rate.
Okay. Because I'm looking the impact on customers. It seems like single family overall, they're just getting a reduction, and that's table 1.3.
Right, we brought this along. This is kind of the encompassing one. If you look down that single family, we reduced one of the tiers, and you'll see, if you look at the proposed revenue adjustments, you get a 5-year average of 1.5 and a 5-year cumulative of 7.7. You can see that single family column, it's much less in both cases, and it's even less on the multifamily, not to the same degree. Then you look at commercial and irrigation, they're going to take some much larger hits based on our cost of service.
Right, so it sounds like the bulk of the increase is being pushed over to commercial and irrigation.
Right, and I can tell you in that budget I showed you, and one of the bigger increases that both the electric company and the water company is the water company has to pay the electric rates and the electric company has to pay the water rates. So as commercial users, we're bearing that burden as well.
We had now the peaking factor has changed, it sounds like. Last time when this was done, the peaking factor was considered over in summer, how much more water is used. But in reading this, it seems like the peaking factor has been taken into consideration a particular day, if there was a higher peak.
Right, and Mike, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the peaking. This was something that we spent a considerable amount of time talking about on that.
President Lal, Commissioner Kadikian, one thing that we had this time that we didn't have in the rate study is our AMI data. So the automated meeting infrastructure.
Yes.
So we have like very fine resolution on the actual peaks and by customer class. So we're able to use that data this time in looking at this analysis. So, you know, every one of the rate settings, you know, they can't be perfect. There's no standard of perfection. But if you have more data, you know, you go ahead and use it and look at it. And that's one of the reasons the peaking factors are different this time.
It's also true on the electric side. So we are bearing the fruit of our investment in that infrastructure in the rates. We didn't have that level of data 5 years ago. So you were still kind of doing things a little bit more on projection. This year we had a lot more hard data that we were able to use as actual. So.
On the allocation of the operating costs for customer service, on the water side, I see that it was distributed 50% on meter and 50% on customer. That's table 3.7.
I don't have that document.
Now, the reason I ask that because that same issue kind of pops up in the electric, and the electric, most of the customer service charge is pushed over to customers, which we have more than meter. And I assume the meter is how much water is used, right? Not the actual number of meters.
Right, okay. Go ahead, Mike.
President Lal, Commissioner Kadikian, the customer, I think when you're saying customer charge versus meter charge, I think is the two things you're talking about. And
that's the allocation of the costs and how we allocate the customer service operation. So,
yeah.
So for those who aren't, you have water and you have electric. That's what we have. We're split into two. Now you have me, so I get divided between the two. The power plant is included as electric. Our customer service operation, Ms. Baye, who you know, her operation gets divided between the two on a percentage basis. And her folks take care of the meters, they take care of the customers, they take care of the billing. Obviously, the electric pays the bulk of that. What did we do this year? What was our split, April?
On the customer service side, 76-24.
So electric is 76 of the cost of those services that aren't specific to one operation, and 24 for water. So my time goes 76-24. April's time goes 76-24. Tammy's time goes 76-24, along with her entire operation. And then we'll split things like, you know, if there's we remodeled the customer service offices, or we bought the phone system that you saw. We'll split that the same way between water and electric.
No, I understand that, but what I'm talking about is that 24 of yours is going to be split somehow between commercial and residential.
And it's by number of meter.
Correct.
So in the water rate analysis, it's by the number of meters.
Not by amount of water that
No.
meter is reading?
No, by
it's
the number
not.
of meters.
It's by number of meters. And in the rate study, there's it's called fixed charge. So like all the meters pay the same fixed charge. And I want to say it was $22 or something like that. But then there's a capacity charge for each meter as well. So then that cost goes up depending on the size of meter, based on the capacity of the meter. In water, it's a little bit different than electric. In electric, you always measure demand. Whereas in water, it's really just the size of the meter. So if you have a bigger meter, you can have more demand on the system. So that those, in your monthly charge or bi-monthly charge, you'll have a fixed amount that you'll pay based on the size of your meter, and it includes that $22 for the customer service folks.
I'm not faulting or anything, I'm just trying to understand, because of this customer service charge is being shifted. It's going to either go into a single-family resident, or it's going to go into commercial, depending on the kinds of meters we have. Single family has thousands of meters, whereas commercial maybe has a couple of meters, but they're bigger.
But the $22 for customer service is the same for every meter. The only thing that's going up on, say, commercial meters is because they're bigger meters, so they can make more demand on the system. And that's a way to like fairly distribute that.
And that's rolled into the fixed cost.
Yeah, that's in the fixed cost.
Right, and I don't have a problem about it with the water. It's the electric side, which I'll come later on, because I see there's a much bigger shift on that customer service cost over in electric over to single family. I could be wrong, but we'll discuss that later. But over here, I like the way that it's split 50-50. It seems like 50 of it is split over by meter and 50 of it by customer, which, you know, if you're saying meter is just the meter itself and not how much water, and customer, those are pretty much the same, aren't they?
No, they're different. So if you have a 3/4 inch meter, you can only get, say, maybe 10 gallons a minute out of that at the rate, the flow rate. But if you have an 8-inch meter, you might get 2,500 gallons per minute out of it. So there's both the volume and then there's the rate. And as engineers, we talk about it. It's kind of like it's like voltage and current.
Right.
So.
Okay, that's fine.
As long as we're on, is that it on water?
Yeah, okay. I think.
As long as we're on water, should we just finish up with water if there are any other questions?
Yeah, I'm still on water.
Okay.
I had one more question.
Sure.
There's the fire hydrant charge, which is being passed on to the ratepayers, right?
So the fire suppression system is allocated out to, in the cost of service analysis, to all customers, right?
And I think there was litigation last year where court had determined that that's a city service or service that a city should provide. I think there's, I know there's.
Yes, there is, and we disagree and we appealed.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Okay. That's it for water for me.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions regarding water specifically before we move on to the next item?
I think in this motion that you have prepared, these numbers should be referred to years. It is not referred to years. I think it is from, as far as I understand, from 19 to 23. 2019, 2020, 2021. But here, this is not referred to each year.
President Lal, Commissioner Avanesian, yes, you are correct. The numbers, the percentages are for fiscal years 2019, 2020, 2018, 2019, 2019, 2020, and so forth. We can certainly add language that refers to the years as well.
Yeah.
They're fiscal years.
That's a good idea.
Mr. Zern, may I ask one more question on that?
Sure.
If we were to eliminate the fire suppression charge, how much dollar figure are we talking? What's the?
We calculated that it was somewhere under $1 million. Mike, you want to help refresh my memory? We'd done a sort of back in the envelope calculation, because it's really difficult, I'll tell you that. I don't, how do you assess a charge? Anyway, but we had tried to value it as best we could, but it.
President Lal, members of the commission, Commissioner Kadikian, there's more than just the annual O&M related to the hydrants, and it's really not much related to the water at all. So there's O&M, and I think Mr. Zun's right, it's about $1 million a year, but there is also our entire water system, and every water system in the state of California is designed based on fire flow. So the value of our assets are based on that, and based on the current depreciated value of assets, it's greater than $10 million.
And-
So it's a very,
Yeah,
I mean,
if we got into that situation where we then had to get the finite number, this is something Mike and his staff put together when we were trying to figure it out from the M&O basis. But just as he said, if it gets to us separating it, we will have it evaluated to say that we put in this size pipe in that neighborhood and X amount of diameter was for potable water and X amount of diameter was for fire suppression. We will separate all of those out, and as Mike said, that number gets a lot bigger than $1 million. 10, I think, is the one we did kind of doing this, but we would have it professionally evaluated and assessed, obviously. But as Mike says, a lot of that capital program that I showed you earlier on the pipes is about fire suppression and pressure is directly related to the fire suppression. I mean, we have a whole area. You saw our master plan that we showed you several months ago, and we have areas in the northwest of the city that we want to focus on, and a lot of that has to do with upgrading pipes for fire suppression and putting new hydrants in. So that number would be pretty substantial when we got to the point of segregating it out as close as we could to what actual was.
yeah, and when we, I think we were speaking a little bit earlier about prioritizing, and one of the ways that we prioritize the mains is the age, the condition, and then fire flow. So I mean, if we have those three things that we look at on top of that, that moves those main replacements up further in the priority. So, I was very surprised that would even be a consideration, that wouldn't be included, because that's how a water system's designed.
We shall see how that turns out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have one more question about this water. For different water pressures, do we have a range of flow of water? For example,
Pressure zones.
Related
for
to the
example, talking about electricity, you have different voltages. In each voltage, you have range of currents. The same thing is in water. You have pressure, and then you have rates. Do you have ranges for that?
Commissioner Avanesian, not related to the rates. So basically the way that our system's designed is by pressure zones. So we have our reservoirs on different parts of the hills, and Glendale's great because it has hills there, and it's a good place to put reservoirs. So just if you live in that zone, depending on your elevation, where your meter's at, is how much pressure you get.
So it is bad luck if you are in a zone that pressure is high.
Yeah, there's some areas where possibly there's maybe a dip. If you want to see it, it's a big dip. I mean, you can't see it unless you look at a map. But you could picture it in your head if you're here and you kind of drive down a little bit in a valley or something and then back up. If you're down in that valley, you might be at that higher. You might be at that higher pressure. So it varies. It really does depend on where
you're paying more money for that?
No, you're not. Because that's not in our current rate study to have a different charge based on the pressure zone that you're in.
Thanks.
So
Details, huh?
your pleasure. Yeah, no, it's good stuff.
Commissioners, any further questions?
On the water, no. Should we move on to the electric, or?
Do you want to take action on the
I think
water?
we should take an action,
Okay.
because these are two separate agenda items, we should take action individually. Would anyone like to support this motion, which is, or move the motion in its current form to support the rates?
With the inclusion of the actual fiscal year dates.
Correct.
I'd like to move it for inclusion as is. However, I do want to comment on one issue that I raised with regards to the fire suppression charge, which is about $1 million, is my understanding, if according to what it is. And because it's a minimal amount compared to the total budget of $54 million per year, approximately, I'm okay with moving it for adoption.
Okay. So we have Commissioner Kadikian proposing the motion. Can Can we have a second?
I would second.
Okay. Commissioner Camargo is seconding. Shall we take a vote?
Yes?
Roll call.
Commissioner Vanessian,
Yes.
Commissioner Kadekian,
Yes?
Commissioner Camargo,
Aye.
President Lau.
Aye.
And the minutes will reflect your comment.
Okay.
And process-wise, are we looking for a hard copy that's signed, one that's signed by all?
President Lal, Commissioner Camargo, no, what I will do is I will make the amendments as directed by the commission, and then the motion will be reconciled by
Okay.
Ms. Lee.
Very good, thank you.
So next is the electric.
Oh, I do have a comment card. Mr. Bert Culver? Correct.
Hello again. I must not be explaining myself very clearly because I came up with a proposal that doesn't take any money away from low-income households and actually provides them more benefit with the same amount of budget. So I'm just going to run through the initial study I had, which came up where I came up with the chart that I showed you. If you took 500 low-income homes, they're getting $15 a month. That it comes out to $90,000 per year for those 500 homes. Map that out over 10 years. Now you have $900,000. Take 10% of that for budget. That gives you $800,000 to build solar panels. That gives you a system. Oh, I closed my chart here. Hold on. That builds you, because you're now on a larger scale of building, so it's actually much cheaper. That gives you, you can build a panel size to build 438 kilowatts. And so annually in this climate and zone, that comes up with 1,600 kilowatt hours generated. So now if you took that 1,600 kilowatt hours, annually. So if you took that 1,600 kilowatt hours annually and divided that amongst the 500 homes, that comes out to $17.50 discount per month for each of those homes. So it's an increase of 17%. And that $1 million, or that $900,000, is not money that's coming from the low-income program. That's money that's coming from the community solar program. So we already have the money. We're just using this money to more efficiently benefit low-income housing. So it seems like a win-win. And to hear back that you thought I was taking money away from low-income housing, I must have not spoken clearly, because this is a way that the city can help more low-income people with a bigger benefit, and also at the same time create a solar community resource. So I must have been misunderstood. So I just request that the you, kind commission, recommend that the city looks into this low-income community solar program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Culver. We'd appreciate having a copy of your comments in hard copy, just to make sure that we're clear on your.
Okay, I submitted that on the last.
Perfect.
Okay. Do I need 4 copies for you? Or
No, that's fine. We'll take care of it. But thank you.
Okay,
Moving
electric,
on.
we're ready to
Yeah.
go. Can we put that up there? Well, I'm just gonna have her put up the same electric chart that I had
would be
for
great.
water, so just to help refresh a little bit. This is a little bit different situation in water. As we had explained last time, we are not quite compliant with Proposition 26, which is the assessing the cost of service equally to the rate classes. So we are going to have to, and it's the residential that is underpaying, and so we're going to have to make that up. We've made the recommendation to do that over a 9-year period, 10 including this one. So you're going to see the increases are going to be a little bit more in the residential side of the operation, while you'll see pretty significant decreases on the business, 3 categories of business, and that's as we make the allocation equal. This is bringing equity to our different classes, and as a result of the cost of service analysis. That was really the big difference. Overall, system-wide, it's a 0.7% 5-year average and a 3.6 total. But in the different classes, that is not how it translates because of our being out of compliance with Proposition 26 and working to get back in. And again, doing it over an extended period of time so we can try to limit the rate shock and the impact. So with that, I will answer any questions you have.
Commissioners, any questions regarding electrical rates?
Yes. Mr. Zern, last time when I'll start overall my concern. Last time when you presented something with regards to how much it was costing for residential for GWP compared to Edison. I think we were at 78 and they were at 52 or 53.
Right.
And I understand you told me that was because of Prop 26, that Edison does not have to take into consideration
That's
Prop
one
26.
one reason.
Okay.
One reason. But I will, if I can interrupt you, because I don't think we have it in the parking lot. We recalculated that based on single family because we were able to segregate because of the metering data we had. We were able to segregate. If you recall, residential includes all residential in the city.
Right.
So we segregated to single family so you could get a little bit better idea of how that comparison, and that's where you saw Edison move way up. We're going to see if we can find it. This sort of fine tunes that and puts a different perspective. But I think I had mentioned to you, and Mr. Georges had indicated, their breakpoints are pretty severe. And as an Edison customer, I can attest to it personally. But you'll see in a single family where you're looking at an average use, I think it was 600 kilowatts, which was a little bit more in line with a house with air conditioning and a family, a little bit larger house. You saw the rate comparisons were quite a bit different. So 665 kilowatt hours a month, and you see Edison shot above everybody. As Mr. Georges had indicated, based on his evaluation of their rate schedule, and LADWP is a little bit higher there, as is Pasadena. Burbank remains the lowest, and you can see where we fit with our proposed rate in the light green, which, as you all know, we're eliminating the rack charge, and that has actually will result in a rate decrease the first year for everybody. So that's a little bit different perspective.
I know, because when I saw that, the prior one where we're paying 78, so California Edison is paying 56, and we're talking residential overall, I'm thinking, what's the point of having our own utility if we're going to end up paying more than buying from Edison?
Right, and that was a pretty low average amount over all residential, so you're talking 1-unit apartment buildings to a 4,000 square foot house. So by narrowing it down to strictly single family, using again our data, you get a whole different perspective on where you're at, and that's also where Edison goes above.
So I take it, if that is correct, then their commercial fees or whatever they charge for commercial customers is very low.
No, it's usually very high. They tend to make up more on the commercial side of the business, but it depends on large versus soft. Their large tends to be a little bit lower. Their medium and small tend to be higher.
All right, I'll go to the questions of allocations here. We have other expenses income, basically about 26 million every year in income of some sort. I assume that's sale of energy?
It's how we book the sale of energy to other utilities, and it could be interest as well, unless is there a specific interest?
Well, no, every year it says income, and when I looked at
Yes.
the description, it says interest and everything else. I assume it's sale of energy, it can't be just interest.
It is sale of energy and how we book it.
So and then we're subtracting that from the revenue requirement. So we've got employees, which we've hired, and they're making us money, generating, selling. How are we allocating this income to the different classes? Who is benefiting from generation here? Commercial, residential?
All of them.
In equal amount? how is it being distributed? Per meter, per customer?
That goes into an M&O, a general revenue, so it's equal distribution on that particular one. That's great, right. Make sure I got that right.
And now, we have residential L1, and that's all kinds of residential, am I correct? Multifamily
That's
altogether?
yeah, that's everybody, right.
And the lighting, that's the city lighting?
The street lighting?
Yeah.
That's separate?
The lighting that is indicated in the customer class, that means the street lighting?
No. Street lighting is segregated out. So the street lighting we take is paid for out of the general fund. And that street lighting, that number, the total of 4 million is cost of service. And then, and so this all goes back to the general fund. They make a payment to
Right,
the
so
utility.
it's what the city is paying.
The
GWP,
utility,
yeah,
correct.
Correct. Okay. So according to this, the city is going to be paying more going forward.
Correct.
Now, it sounds like there's a shortfall for residential of about 27% over the
That's the
whole
number,
COSA.
correct, yeah.
And on this 5-year increase, we've got approximately 9% increase.
For residential, right.
For residential,
9.2.
that's right.
Right.
So the other 18% is going to follow in the following 5
9
years.
years, we'll get back to even in 9 years is what our projection was.
So in the next set of increases, there's going to be approximately 18% increase.
Which will
For
will
residential,
spread.
yeah. Spot purchases, for example, we have in purchase power detail cost for 19, 20, 21, spot purchases of 18 million, 19 million, and 19.9 million. Spot purchase, I understand, is the expensive purchase of
It can be.
electricity on.
It can be. It can also, you know, sometimes spot purchases are necessary. You're in a bit of a jam and you have to go out and buy. Other times you're looking at spot purchases that are beneficial to the city. So I don't know if you recall when I had shown you some of our the benefits of buying a lot of hydropower from the Pacific Northwest when they had tremendous snow, not last year, because that has dropped, but 2 years ago. So sometimes spot market purchases can be more costly than longer term contracts or even shorter term contracts that you lock prices in. But also you can work them to your advantage by playing what the market is depending on climate issues or somebody's got a glut of power in a particular area. If we can get our transmission connected, then we can make a good purchase.
The reason I'm asking is because year 4, 5, and on, we're supposed to have the upgraded Grayson, but the spot purchases are still around 12.7, 14.2 million. I see them dropping.
Right.
Shouldn't we eliminate them? Shouldn't Grayson be doing our spot, whatever we need?
No, because we would remember what the proposal is that we maximize the 200 megawatts of transmission to bring renewables in, so that we'd be purchasing maybe a different kind of power, but we would be trying to bring in as much renewable as we
Right,
could.
because we got-
And that 200 megawatts was included in all of our calculations. Grayson will provide baseload, contingency, and backup, but we want to maximize that limited transmission and bring renewables in. Our hope was we didn't have to bring any kind of thermal generation gas, and that we could maximize renewables. And those spot market purchases could very well be renewables or renewable energy credits.
And I know we discussed this before. You estimated the debt servicing for Grayson and did a conservative estimate. But again, City Council hasn't decided yet what they're going to do. Once
Correct.
they do, are we going to go back and, well, I guess on the next 5 year, we'll be reevaluating, is that it?
Right, every 5 years, that's the full reevaluation.
there's on this table, it says electric cash reserve, and we've got fund balance of 236 million, and that's about 545 days of cash on hand, it says. None of this is being used for Grayson upgrade. Grayson is all entirely bond funded. Am I correct?
That's our projection, correct, right. So we have built into this 5-year study, though, a drawdown on reserves, so that you have, end of 5 years, I think we were 190, Craig?
Yeah. And is the drawdown, does it have anything to do with Grayson or no?
No, we're using our reserves to help offset the rate impact.
Has City Council set a limit as to how many days of cash on hand it wants?
We have a reserve policy for each of our operations, which we had conducted when we adopted the last 5-year study. So the conservative area is about the 180, 190 for electric, and I think it's about 15 for water, something like that. So we've erred to the conservative side just mainly because of the condition of Grayson today. But that's something we would evaluate each 5-year period as well, is to see, what's the, in my term, baseball term, sweet spot for the reserves. But right now we still have to deal with Grayson, and to the extent that we go out and look at contracts for renewables as well. We want to make sure that we're covered.
It says on table 3.5, there's the unbundled revenue requirement by class, and that's where I'm going to come to the customer question when I was asking about the water. In here, for example, for residential, there's 7.9 million allocated for customer, whereas for L2, LD2, PC1, SL, all together is about 1.8 million. Mm-hmm. There's a disproportionate amount of that customer service being charged to residential.
There's a disproportionate amount of infrastructure dedicated to the residential. So 89,000 meters is what our total count is. About 75,000 of those are in residential. We are a residential utility. There's no question about it. And so when you spread the costs for the infrastructure by the meter, you're going to see that most of the costs go to the residential, or a higher cost for sure.
Can't we spread the cost instead of by meter, by wattage used, or how much electricity they buy? Because
not under the cost of service analysis. You have to take the fixed cost into play, and then the consumption costs will have some impact, but it's a great deal of it has to do with the fixed cost in your budget. And most of the fixed costs for us are assigned to the residential because, as I said, we're a residential utility.
And when we're talking about customer here, is this cost of payroll for customer service, or what is it are we talking exactly?
It's just the amount of money we expend to manage that portion or that rate class, from everything from our infrastructure, our maintenance, our customer service, everything, and that's where the majority of our costs are.
I mean, my objective is not to question the figures. My objective is to see if there is something we can do better for the residential ratepayers here, because they're going to bear a huge burden, and I understand it's because of Prop 26, but also whether there is a different way of calculating it to make it a little bit more equitable.
Well, the way we calculate it is the legal way to calculate it that's been vetted by both internal and outside counsel. So when you say a better way, I think this is the best possible way under the law. When you look at, for instance, a comparison to somebody like the city of Burbank, when you were looking at rate comparisons, they got a much greater commercial base than we do, significantly greater than we do. They're almost the same size utility we are, and they have 35,000 less meters than we do, but they have a lot of commercial. When you have a lot of commercial like that, when you're generating that much revenue, that can help you spread certain costs, especially on the infrastructure, more significantly. We don't have that. We have most of our costs are all associated with residential. And as much as even, they're good questions, by the way, but I want to tell you, we've debated this 9-year plan. Was it 27? How could we make that less? Are you sure? Did we do? But it's just the fact that, and it's not unusual. for any utility, whether it's a water utility, an electric utility, a sewer utility, whatever, it had been the practice to have commercial accounts subsidize residential. It was just, for the most part, the way things were. Residents got a break, commercial would pay more. Proposition 218 and Proposition 26 all but eliminated that ability for us to do that. It had to be a strict cost of service analysis and those distributed. If you can imagine, if we were to deviate from that, you know, you'll get those three categories to the right over there that would not be happy, and we'd have a problem there. So we haven't found a better way to allocate costs that are legal and that will pass muster with both internal and external legal counsel. But we certainly, you're right. They are paying, they are paying a greater burden because most of the infrastructure is dedicated to that particular aspect of our utility.
My final question is the transfer. How are we allocating that? Because, we're going through a whole lot of micro detail, allocate this here, allocate that there. How are we allocating the transfer?
So the direction from council is to continue to include the transfer in our calculations. They vote on that each year as part of the budget process, so that'll be included on the 12th. If they were to not, for instance, if they were to say, or a majority of the council was not to approve the transfer, we would have to go back. Then we would pull back the rates and we'd have to go back and reevaluate.
But the question is not about the transfer, it's about how do we allocate the transfer? Of that 20 million we're transferring, how much of it is coming from residential? How much of it is coming from
We do it
commercial?
across the board at the, it's like any other cost, so it's just.
Per meter, per wattage, per customer?
Well, per meter, that's essentially how we do it, so.
Well, the problem I have is because we don't have an exact definition of what are we getting for this transfer. Are we getting power lines? Are we getting customer service people calling? So that you can allocate it to the right class. It's just a transfer, which council directs us to do. But why? Is because of the charter. For what service, there's no explanation there. Are we doing it because we need customer service so that we can allocate it more to the residential? That's my problem. I don't know why I know why we're doing it. What are we getting in return so that we allocate it accordingly to the right customer class?
And I don't want to get too far in the weeds because, as I've said before, this is an active legal case.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so,
I know,
this
but
is
that's my
this
concern.
is the city attorney, and we have that on the record. I don't want to ignore your comment, but I really don't feel comfortable. We don't feel comfortable talking about it because it is an active case. But I think you're looking at what the general premise of the transfer is, and that was to provide general services. Other than that, I guess we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out in the court.
Fair enough.
Any other questions?
I have one question. I was just comparing this water and electricity.
Yes.
And the rates for water, it goes from 1 up to 2, which is a kind of, it is, although the capital improvement is almost close to each other, 10,000, 9,000, of course, 10 million, $9 million dollars. But when it comes to this increase, it seems to me water is kind of like more than electricity. Why? I want to understand why is that. This is 2%. After 5 years, this is 1%.
Right.
So what
Right.
is the? I want to understand what is the reason.
There is no correlation between the two. The two are viewed totally separately. So you have to take each operation separately and then assess all of the costs and then assign those out to the classes and look at what you need to keep for things like our reserve level, our pay-go capital, how to cover our expenses, any projected issues we have with purchased water, as we talked about earlier. So each is done separately. Their rate schedules aren't tied in any way. They would be, it's possible that one could be, twice as much as the other one because based on that particular operation, there are issues that had to be addressed. Excuse me. But I think for the most part, what we had our mission and our goal was to keep, after our last 5-year rate increase, was to keep our rates to the lowest possible impact to the ratepayer. And we had talked about numbers like 2 and below, and we were able to get ourselves into a situation where we're doing that. And that's not every 5 years. Next 5 years could be ones, could be halves. We'll have to wait and see what's on the horizon, and then what water especially has had to deal with a lot of regulatory issues over the last couple of years. So we're adjusting to those as well. But I hope I answered your question. The two are very, very separate, so you could never really look at them in the same manner when it came to setting the rates.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further questions, comments?
Just one comment. I just want to thank the staff for this report. I read it. I agree with most of it except for the transfer. So my questioning is not a reflection on the good work that everybody did here. It's just the transfer I disagree with. That's all.
Understood, and we appreciate the comment.
Does anyone on the commission wish to, at this time, make a motion to adopt the rates or not adopt the proposed rates as outlined in the draft motion that we have in front of us?
I would put forth a motion to adopt the rates as shown here, with the caveat that we discussed earlier, which is to indicate the years that go along with the different with the 5 different rate increases.
Would anyone wish to second that motion? Commissioner Avanesian? Okay. Should we take the roll call?
Commissioner Venetian?
Yes.
Commissioner Kadikian?
No.
Commissioner Camargo?
Aye.
President Lau?
Aye.
President Law, Commission members, just for clarification, the motion also includes the amendments to the ordinance. So it's a rate adoption and amendments to the ordinance.
So do we have to have 2? No? Okay.
No, one motion will suffice.
Okay. Next item?
6, oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The general manager may refer the matter to the appropriate staff for investigation and report.
Do you have any additional cards?
I do not.
Okay. Next item?
6, agenda forecast.
So, members of the commission, we have the summer season upon us. We have most of these are our regular updates. Water conservation, we'll get a chance to talk about that. It's kind of still the beginning of the summer, so we'll see where we're at. We'll probably bring in some of the recent legislation that was passed too and how that impacts us on our water operations. Ms. Valle will be here with her customer service update. Mr. Keenan will be back in August with his utility modernization update. We have our legislative update, which is end of session, and kind of where things laid out and how the impacts are affecting us. It will be at that meeting as well that I'll give you, just as briefly as it may be, kind of the results of what we received from generally on the proposals for the RFP. Can't give you any details at that point in time, but I can say we had a robust, we had 10, we had 20, we had 30, and then we embark on on the real work of going through those and assembling, as I said, a portfolio. The Labor Day holiday meeting was canceled, and then we roll into October. I would anticipate October we could add to that I would hope I have a pretty meaty update for you on the clean energy RFP.
Sounds good.
And then in November, we have elections, and we'll go over this strategic planning again as we look forward to beginning a session for the legislative That might be a little bit early, but we put it on here because at one time there was some desire by the commission to at least chat about maybe is there any kind of legislation we want to champion and be early in the game as far as getting out specific legislation or recommendations for legislation for the upcoming session that begins in March.
Maybe earlier, I'm not sure.
I think we kind of officially, could, yeah, but if we have any ideas, you're absolutely right, Ms. Law. We'd have to have that in pretty early ahead of that by at least, I'd say January. If we were really serious, I think it'd get something in before Christmas even.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So that's where we stand. And again, if there's anything you want to add, please let me know. I think we can easily do it, during meetings or between meetings with just emails and to the president and we can put something
Just for
on.
July, do we need to highlight that that's a special meeting, correct?
July, yes, you're absolutely right. So that we took a week for the 4th holiday.
Okay. I think that looks good. Commissioners, anything to add? No. All right. In that case, we'll move to the next item.
7, adjournment.
I move.
All right. Second? I'll second if I can. Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.